Got it. Good evening and welcome to the 2023 annual meeting of the Stuyvesant Town Peter Cooper Village Tenants Association. We have a very simple meeting for you. We're going to start with a business portion of the meeting, then have panelist presentations, and afterwards we'll have a Q&A. We expect the meeting to be about an hour, maybe just a few minutes over. So our panelists include, or will include, we have our native son, Keith Powers. We have our Assembly member, Harvey Epstein. We have our New York State Senator, Kristen Gonzalez. And we have Aya Keefe, who's Manhattan Borough President, Deputy Manhattan Borough President. Jerry Nadler will be joining us at around 7:15, but he's actually, as we speak, voting on the debt ceiling. Very important. So now I'm going to turn the meeting over to the chair of our Tenants Association, Kirsten Ottle.
Hello, everyone. As set forth in the bylaws of the Stuyvesant Town Peter Cooper Village Tenants Association, a quorum is 10% of the members or 100 votes, whichever is less. A quorum has been met for the annual election of directors. Therefore, we call the annual meeting to order. Members have voted for 2 nominees for board directors. We have incumbent Susan Steinberg, and we would like to welcome our newest board member, Anna Lombardo.
Thank you very much. I want to thank all of you who voted for me and allowing me to continue to serve. And I certainly want to welcome our newest member, Anna Lombardo. Anna's a longtime Stuyvesant Town resident and a building leader for the Tenants Association. She worked very hard on the effort to shut down the combined heat and power plant, and most recently is co-founder of an organization called ARF, Association of Responsible Residents and Furry Friends of STPCV, to try to address needs of pets, pet owners, and the community at large. Anna is a filmmaker and prop and set, dressing 4-person for television and major motion picture studios. Welcome, Anna. Now I'd like to name the members of the board who were able to make it this evening in alphabetical order, and you can give a wave when I call your name. You've already met Kirsten Ottle. Rebecca Carroll, who's our Vice President of Internal Affairs. Jonathan Derrico, a fairly new member of the board. Denise Faverol. Ann Greenberg, who's our Vice President of External Affairs and Director of Communications. Lynn Janofsky. Sherry Kirschenbaum. Adam Liggio, our Treasurer. And Jeanette Sheehan, who's our techie. Those who were not able to make it include Erica Aylesworth, Julia Gabber, Judy Miller, Stephen Nowicki, and Sandro Sherrod. But I've saved one. I've saved the best for last, and that is Al Doyle. And the reason I've saved him for last is because after 43 years of serving on the Tenants Association, Al has decided to concentrate on other aspects of his life. Imagine that. We are going to miss him, but don't worry, I've strong-armed him into serving as our advisor when we need him. And I know Al would like to make a few remarks. Al, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. My name's Al Doyle, and I was born and raised in Stuyvesant Town. My wife, Pat, and I are dues-paying members of the TA since we first joined in 1980. We became active members during a time when rent regulations were under constant attack at City Hall and in the state legislature in Albany. We organized trips to Albany to lobby the state legislature, the State Division of Housing and Community Renewal, and the New York State Governor's Office. Each year, we also travel to the Rent Guidelines Board to support fair and affordable rents. We all are organizing along with other affordable housing advocates for passage of favorable housing legislation as we move forward in these uncertain times. Our years as a member of the Tenants Association have afforded me and Pat an opportunity that we could not have had if we were not involved. We have met so many outstanding people that we can call our neighbors, and participated in events in the most outstanding community in the most outstanding city on earth. As we move forward, we are presented with ever-increasing and seemingly intractable problems. However, I am encouraged. People in Stuyvesant Town and Peter Cooper Village are not afraid to stand up to challenges. My personal observation, our current board of directors is one of the hardest working, talented, and devoted boards that we've ever had. And to our new neighbors, our not so new neighbors, and our old neighbors, I just want to say that our reputation as an outstanding and safe community remains intact. I'm proud that I live here. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Al. Al, you've been the beating heart of our organization. As I said before, we'll miss you, but I'll probably be on the phone with you in a couple of days to find out something or other. So don't you worry, you won't be leaving us quite so soon. And now I'd like our treasurer, Adam Liggio, to present our financial condition.
Okay, yes, thank you, Susan. We currently have $89,498 of working capital, not including other sources of liquid capital. This working capital stems in part from our membership dues. So that all our neighbors can be members, we offer a reduced membership rate for those participating in the SCREE and DREE programs. Our revenue this year from dues and grants came to a total of $71,702, with our total expenses for the year being $75,448, with a $3,745 deficit with revenue over expenses. The major expenses for the association, which came to a total of $69,941, include legal, communications, expert consultants such as our construction costs expert, website consulting, printing, Facebook page, database, and message center. I think I could speak for the entire board when I say thank you all for your continued support.
Thank you, Adam. And now this quirky little thing happens. According to the bylaws, in order to make sure that the voting has ceased, we have to adjourn the meeting, but it's only the business portion of the meeting. So don't go away, because now we've opened the general portion of the meeting, and I'd like to start it out by asking Ann Greenberg to discuss the Rent Guidelines Board.
Thank you, Susan. As probably all of you know, June is Rent Guidelines Board month, when rent adjustments for lease renewals are decided. Last year, the RGB delivered us a major shock, a 3.25% increase for a one-year lease and 5% for a two-year lease. Those were the highest increases in almost a decade, and the RGB is not done with us. This year, the proposed range for leases starting on October 1st is 2 to 5% for a one-year lease and 4 to 7% for a two-year lease. Let that sink in. 2 to 5% for a one-year lease and 4 to 7% for a two-year lease. It is critical that you tell the RGB this is unsustainable and unacceptable for you. So how do you do that? It's as easy as making a 2-minute phone call to the RGB or submitting a written document online, or you can do both. There's nothing to stop you from letting it rip however you feel you want to do it. But you have other options. They include a 2-minute video or audio and testifying in person at the virtual meeting on June 13th. That's from 5 to 8 p.m. or an in-person hearing in the Bronx, Brooklyn, or Queens. I hear you thinking, what about Manhattan? Well, we'll leave that to Keith Powers to explain when it's his turn to speak. In any case, I encourage everybody to do whatever feels most comfortable for you, but you must do it by June 15th because the final vote is on June 21st. So that deadline to submit testimony in any form is June 15th, which isn't that far away. We've already e-blasted you the various options with links, but we will send out a reminder and we'll post information on our website in case you're not familiar with it. It's STPCVTA.org. And if you don't know what to say, if you've never done this before, we have tips for you. We'll post them. We'll have them for you at our table at the flea market this Saturday. Look for us opposite the fountain at our usual spot. We're always happy to answer your questions, and we want to hear you and hear your stories. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. It's really, really important because if we don't make our voices heard, the Rent Guidelines Board will think that we're just perfectly fine and they will continue to deliver really horrific increases. So now I'm going to talk about our newish board member, Jonathan Derrico. Our bylaws allow us to fill vacancy in between elections and in between terms. And we can fill them by just a majority vote of the board. So a vacancy happened in mid-2022, and Jonathan was already serving as a pro bono legal advisor to us, and we thought he'd make a really good addition to our board, so a majority of the board voted him in. John is a class action lawyer, and he professionally serves on Pro Bono Advisory Board for Legal Services NYC and on the Center for Human Rights Advisory Council for the American Bar Association. John is also a member of Manhattan Community Board 6, and I've asked John to update us on the motion for declaratory judgment. Please, John.
Thank you very much, Susan. As you all know, hardly anything we do is more important than keeping our apartments rent stabilized. Back in February, the Supreme Court of the state of New York ruled in our favor to keep Blackstone, our owner, from deregulating thousands of apartments in Stuytown and Peter Cooper Village. In short, Justice Robert Reed agreed with us that the 2019 rent laws supersede the 2015 regulatory agreement Blackstone has with the city. That agreement allows them to remove from rent regulation units that were illegally deregulated and then re-regulated as part of the landmark Roberts v. Tishman-Speyer class action lawsuit. The bottom line, if you're paying more than $2,800 in rent, you are affected by this litigation. And what do you stand to lose? If you're not rent regulated, you'll be exposed to the open market. Your rent and any associated protections with your lease will be entirely at the whim of the owner. And we know what's happening with rents these days. You all know that the median rent in Manhattan is over $4,000, and you will not be guaranteed a lease renewal and other critical protections. If you want to know more, like Ann previewed, please go to our website. The latest on the lawsuit is that Blackstone has filed a notice of appeal, and they have 6 months from this notice of appeal, which is dated February 22nd, to finalize this. 6 months will be up in August. Of course, we will vigorously fight this appeal and continue to protect the rights of our tenants. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. So the two additional initiatives that we have for last year include challenges to major capital improvements. Now, you know, we always fight them, but we decided to take it up a notch, consolidated the 39 outstanding MCIs into 4 categories: facade, video intercom in Peter Cooper Village, gas repiping, and hot water heaters. We heard back on the facade MCIs, and there were 26 facade MCIs that we filed an Article 78 on, and of those 26, the court annulled 19, and of those 19, sent 12 back to the DHCR. Now, what was this all about? Well, 19 of the MCIs got annulled because the MCI applications had passed the 2-year filing deadline. And the 12 that were sent back, now that's a really interesting thing. For years, our lawyers had been arguing that the landlord was claiming costs that, in point of fact, were for things not depreciable under IRS regulations. And we had been ignored, both by the DHCR and courts during oral arguments. Well, lo and behold, for the first time in this court, under Judge Frank Nervo, he decided that in point of fact, that was accurate. What are things that are depreciable? Well, it's things like a hot water heater or a video intercom. But things that are being claimed, such as pressure washing, scaffolding, brick pointing. These are not depreciable under IRS regulations and should never be allowed. So by sending the 12 back to the agency, the court is asking them to do their own depreciability analysis. Blackstone has appealed that ruling as well. They appealed it on February the 16th. And so again, sometime in August, they will be potentially filing a brief, and we will respond to that and we will fight that as well. And finally, the other major challenge that we have in the hopper is against the Division of Housing and Community Renewal for their so-called reasonable cost schedule. This was an operational bulletin that they issued by virtue of the statutory requirements of the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act, which indicated that they had to come up with a comprehensive listing of things that were MCI-able, if I can put it that way. And they came up with an operational bulletin a couple of years ago. And when we looked at the costs on that listing, we just absolutely gasped because they were way too high. You know, you've heard the rent is way too high. Well, the MCIs are way too high. And so we retained a cost construction expert who looked at the costs, and he too agreed that they were way higher than industry standards. So we filed a challenge and the judge ruled against us. And they ruled against us in a very narrow way. They only ruled against us with respect to the actual cost because they felt that the agency had a rationale for the cost that they approved. But there was another aspect which they ignored and which we are going to pursue, which is the statutory language. The statutory language does not allow them to charge for cost associated with work such as pointing, sidewalk sheds, pressure washing, and as well, they are not allowed to ask for waivers. So for example, if Beam Living wanted an MCI for something and they decided that the MCI schedule wasn't giving them enough money, under the current operational bulletin, they have a right to ask for more. Well, the statutory language does not allow it. So our appeal has been will be filed either later today or tomorrow, and we will have 6 months to present a brief. I just want to thank everybody for their membership dues because it pays for our legal efforts. And without you, we couldn't do this. We couldn't protect you if you didn't help us. So now I'm going to turn the meeting over to our panelists, and I'm going to start with our homegrown city council member, Keith Powers.
Thank you, Susan. And I think it'd be remiss for me, and first of all, nice to see everyone. It's Councilmember Keith Powers sitting here in Stuyvesant Town as we speak, and would be remiss not to say a very big shout out and thank you to my friend and someone who's done so much for our neighborhood, and Al Doyle, somebody I feel like has been involved in every big fight that this neighborhood, our tenants have taken on in this neighborhood, from the obviously sale back in to Tishman Spire originally, to more recent fights, but long before that. So I want to thank you to Al Doyle, and he knows and everybody knows we have one of the best tenants associations here in the city, the best. And the work, I always say, the work we do here on behalf of tenants is so critical, not just for our neighborhood, for what goes far beyond it, for people who don't have the resources and the experience we do. So thank you to Susan and everyone for your never-ending work on behalf of me and our tenants here in Stuyvesant Town who really deserve it. We did talk about the Rent Guidelines Board, which I really encourage everyone to get organized, get out there and testify. Even if you think, oh, my voice doesn't matter, the pressure matters, the appearances matter, the words matter, and more importantly, the anecdotes and the experiences that you can share do matter. Don't let anybody raise your rent without you being part of that conversation. Don't let anybody raise your rent without you telling them why that's going to be harmful to you, and to share your own experiences. So I really ask you to sign up and testify for that. We had last year, for folks remember, the Rent Guidelines Board proposed holding public hearings only in Queens and Bronx, which was a significant change from public hearings in the past, before the pandemic, when they were in almost every borough except for Staten Island. And we had, thank you to the leadership of the Tenants Association, advocated along with council members throughout Manhattan and Brooklyn to hold hearings in those boroughs and to hold a virtual hearing, to hold them in Manhattan, Brooklyn as well, and also have a virtual hearing. And they eventually did agree to have a virtual hearing, but didn't conduct one in Manhattan, which we were disappointed about. Similarly, this year, they proposed a schedule of hearings in the outer boroughs and a virtual hearing, but no hearing in Manhattan. Again, very, very upset. So we put together a letter from all the council members in Manhattan and our borough president, Mark Levine, asking for them again to have a hearing in Manhattan. We just got a letter back from them. So the bad news is the good news is they're likely to return to the normally program schedule starting next year. They are going to reserve a portion of the virtual hearing for tenants in Manhattan. So while we won't be able to show up in person at Cooper Union or somewhere else, if you are planning to testify, they're going to dedicate parts of that virtual hearing. You can sit at home, and they will put the first portion of the virtual hearing to be Manhattan only, which is good because for folks who maybe not be able to make it out of the house, you'll still have an opportunity to testify, submit testimony, read it. So it's even more important, I think, that you take advantage of that opportunity. And hopefully next year, we believe they will bring us back to an in-person hearing. And I'm very disappointed that they won't give us a Manhattan hearing. I'm glad they're doing this portion of it. But, still very, very important that people get out there and testify. And I'll be for sure testifying. And what Ann said is right. Last year combined with this year is far too much to ask people to pay right now. We're going to be asking them to do a rent freeze or rent rollback like we've done in the past. It's fair that if they're going to do a high rent increase last year, they give us relief this year. And I really am going to encourage the mayor and the Rent Guidelines Board to reconsider those these high increases that they keep throwing out at the beginning of the process that then get pared down to still high numbers for a lot of tenants who are limited income and can't afford it. So I know I'll be joining many of my colleagues in the Manhattan delegation and council to do that. But it's just not fair and it's not right. So we will be there testifying and hope people will join us as well. I wanted to give just a few updates about the city council, just to share people what's going on. We are in our process, right in the middle of our process right now in the city budget. The mayor has proposed his executive budget of just not so long ago. In April, we did a month long of hearings on the budget this past month in May. And to review every single agency, ask tough questions, ask them why they're making proposed cuts to certain areas, push back. And now we have about a month to get a budget done so that we can bring what I think is not a good budget right now to a much better place. As folks know, there are significant cuts to our city's library systems in there, including the New York Public Library, which we're pushing to reverse. We have a lot of cuts still. So they want to trim down the 3K program and not do an expansion of that like it was planned and proposed. There are cuts to CUNY, which as a CUNY grad school graduate myself, I care deeply about CUNY. A lot of other cuts to services that I think the council is not going to stand for. We also have to make significant investments in things like mental health. I've been pushing a lot to expand arts in our school system and to do a lot more. So we have about a month to get that done, but I want folks to know that we are fighting very, very hard to restore some of the cuts that have been advertised out there, including just our neighborhood libraries, which, we want 7-day service. We want them to be open and well-funded. They're a resource for so many New Yorkers. So our deadline is the end of June, and that's when we have to approve our budget, but we're going to be pushing back very hard on that. On the legislative front, we have a number of bills on a couple of different areas that I think people have written to us about. Number one is e-bikes. We have a growing crisis here in the city around e-bikes and fires. And we see a lot of in residential properties, and no, we're a huge one here. A growing amount of fires that are being caused by people bringing in those e-bike batteries and build bikes into their buildings. Mismatch of battery and bike and charger, or an outdated or refurbished or not up to caliber. charger or battery that's causing these massive explosions. I've had at least one in my district. So we have last year we had over 200 fires caused by these batteries. So we have two bills that would help get those batteries off the streets. These go in tandem with a law we passed just a few months ago to stop the selling of batteries that don't meet a specific standard of safety, and to ban refurbished batteries from being sold as well. Mine would actually allow New Yorkers to swap out used batteries for new ones that do meet those industry standards and can be safely charged. It's something that the FDNY has called for and supported. It's something that we've been working with the delivery companies on, but to get those really unsafe batteries off of the streets, even while we transition to banning the sale of them. And the second one is to create a fire program to allow the delivery companies to provide fireproof containers to delivery workers that they employ so they can safely charge a battery, which would help contain the fires if they do occur. So we've had a hearing on those, and we're really pushing hard to get those passed. One thing we've been working on with the borough president, I know his deputy borough president is here as well. Scaffolding, the scourge of scaffolding in New York City, something that is a bane of my existence as a New Yorker. And in addition to making the city seem so unsightly, it is crushing our small businesses who are buried underneath it. It causes quality of life issues and safety issues in places. It's causing massive expenses to buildings and property owners throughout the city, including our small building owners, our co-ops, our condos, and much more. And we don't see this in any other city. So as folks may have remembered or seen, we put out a report with the borough president and some colleagues and a package of legislation to say, hey, let's take our city back from the scaffolding. So we have a package of legislation. I see I have 1 minute left, so I'm going to move quickly. And then a few others. One is to move our city's vehicle fleet to zero emissions, which we're hoping to get passed very soon. And one I'm proud to announce that we are going to pass next stated, which is our zero waste package to expand composting, recycling in the city and to divert waste. I've been working on this for years, so I'm very, very excited that we're going to bring back composting in a real way to the city and start working on moving in zero waste. And the last thing I mentioned is a couple bills that we passed last week that are really, really, really important, but that had a lot of controversy around them between us and the mayor, which is about housing vouchers for people that are facing eviction or in a homeless shelter system. These would allow people to get vouchers sooner if they're facing eviction to prevent them from going in eviction. It would change the timeline so you don't have to sit in a shelter for 90 days in order to qualify for one, and expedite the process to get people out of shelters into housing. That is a groundbreaking, really important package when we talk about housing and homelessness in the city. And we are prepared, I think, to fight the mayor more on it if we need be, but we'll help a lot of families, particularly in need of housing and facing eviction, to be saved. And I'm really happy about that. So I know a lot of questions. I'll stop there and let others take it from there.
Thank you very much, Keith. A lot of good stuff there. Thank you. Next, we'd like to hear from our Senator, Kristen Gonzalez.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. It's so good to see a lot of familiar faces. Good to meet the new members as well. I also want to echo and thank Al's service. And also, just thank you all so much for having us here today. I think it's really been an incredibly busy session. So this is an important opportunity to kind of take a moment, answer some questions from you, but also give you all updates on what we've been doing up in Albany. We're up in Albany right now, myself and Assemblymember Epstein. We're at the second to last week of session. And, part of what I was asked in presenting to you all today was to reflect back on what this session has looked like a bit. I really, in thinking about and reflecting now that we're near the end, really see it as having happened in three parts, right? We started the year really strong, especially in the state Senate, with the fight against LaSalle, which was the governor's pick for the highest court of New York. We wanted someone who represented our values, who wanted to protect, for example, women's right to choose and wanted to represent workers. So that was my first fight, and we won that fight. We were able to get a judge that represents our district for sure, or our district's values for sure, onto the highest court. And then it brought us pretty much at the tail end of that into the budget season. And you just heard from, Council Member Powers on, their current budget process. Ours looks very similar in that we had hearings and we had, several budget bills. And so, in the hearings portion of that, I am the chair of Internet and Technology. And what we really focused on was ensuring that all of our state government was adhering to the highest possible cybersecurity standards. And we pushed, ITS, which is the governor's agency that works on that, and found some significant gaps. So we've been working on that. And then in addition, pushed for some of our key priorities that I've spoken to so many of you about, including climate. We pushed, ensuring that we had renewable energy and the Build Public Renewables Act in the budget. The MTA, fixing the MTA. We pushed housing and, tenant protection, specifically with a bill called Good Cause Eviction, and so much more. And at the end of those hearings, and once we passed our versions of the budget and then had negotiations between the Senate Assembly and the executive, what we had at the end of the budget, and what I definitely want to highlight for all of you today, were some significant wins that included the Build Public Renewables Act. So for the first time ever, we can have publicly owned, publicly operated renewable energy. It included the All Electric Buildings Act, which means new buildings being built are going to be running off of renewable energy. We passed significant funding for the MTA and 5 free bus routes throughout the city. So, that campaign was very fruitful. We also were able to invest in key things that affect our community. $1 billion for migrants, universal school meals for the first time for students. We put $1 billion in childcare. We increased funding for arts and parks, and specifically in our own district as well, which has specific state parks. So I'm really excited about how far we got in this budget with some of the things that, we all had spoken about and cared about. We did have some losses, and I would say that, this is especially relevant for this conversation and something I wanted to update you all on, which is, we didn't pass anything around housing, right? And we're in a housing crisis, not only on the city level with the rent guidelines board. So echo Councilmember Powers and encouraging every single one of you to reach out to the rent guidelines board and push back, because I think those numbers are unacceptable and don't reflect a lot of the realities of everyday New Yorkers. But we didn't pass, universal rent control and other things that we would need to address the crisis. So, on the state level. So we're going, and we have been over the last few weeks, continuing to push on that. And I'm hoping, and we'll keep you all updated between now and the end of session to have some movement on housing. We also had significant challenges around bail reform and charter schools. And, we didn't increase the cap. We fought the governor on that, but we also did say yes to bringing, I think about 25 zombie charters online. So, there were some wins, some losses. And then from a legislative perspective, for our office specifically in the budget, I was able to carry and pass for the first time in the country, a law that says that law enforcement cannot track and buy your personal health data from, telecommunication companies if you are coming to New York to exert your right for an abortion or to seek reproductive health care or anything else. And that was a significant step towards protecting all people's rights to choose and protecting us from privacy and surveillance. So it was a nice intersection between what we care about and our committee. And since the budget, we've also been carrying and passing some key pieces of legislation around cybersecurity, the Secure Our Data Act to set a gold standard for what that should look like so we don't have any more ransomware attacks. It includes a bill on economic abuse in shelters, so expanding access to information around that, a bill for shelter Wi-Fi. We are also passing this week, I think I heard one of our new board members is interested in class action lawsuits or works in class action lawsuits. We're passing a bill tomorrow, actually, that says that we are able to, change the law in a way that if you have been negatively impacted by government operations, we can now have a class action lawsuit to reflect that. Whereas before, government operations or agencies were exempt in that way. So that was a big loophole. So we're really excited about that. As well as some other pieces of legislation, online recovery of your accounts using your ID. If you go to the Apple Store, you should be able to use your ID to get back into your account, and more. So I just to wrap up, I just want to give you guys also, not only from a legislative perspective, but for our office, what we're going to be focusing on, what we have been focusing on, and then 2 logistical updates. So we're going to be focusing on this summer, artificial intelligence. We just had a roundtable with the Manhattan Borough President, as well as Assemblymember Boris, along with several companies around what we're going to do with the future of AI. So we're really going to dig into that and have hearings this summer. And we've also been working a lot around street safety across the district. So making sure pedestrians and bikers are protected, that people are driving safely. And so we've been doing a lot of canvassing around that. And then finally, our 2 logistical updates. We opened our office. We are officially in Manhattan. We are 2 blocks away from Grand Central, between where Grand Central is and the UN. And I'm happy to share that address in the chat with all of you. So please engage us, come anytime. And then finally, and most exciting, for me at least, is we just went through our discretionary fund process, and I'm really happy to announce that we awarded Stuytown discretionary funding of $10,000 because we want to contribute. And yeah, we were able to fulfill that ask. Shout out to Susan, who went through the entire application process, was so incredible to work with, to give us all the information we needed in a quick turnaround to support all of the incredible work that you're doing, especially given the pending appeal. So I'm going to stop there, and I want to thank you all again for just, having me, and happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much, Kristen. My goodness, that was, I don't think you could talk any faster.
Yeah, I was trying to keep it
so much
really
information. That was incredible. And thank you for the grant.
Oh, of course. And luckily there's a transcript and recording.
Okay. Next up, we have Assemblymember Harvey Epstein. I can't hear you, Harvey. I know I don't see you muted, but we can't hear you.
You may need to reconnect your audio or log on, log off, something.
Maybe this is where I start singing "Things Taste Better with Coca-Cola." Well, I'll give you another 15 seconds, Harvey, and then I think I'm going to move on to Aya. Okay, Aya, take it away.
Oh, Harvey, we can't hear you. I will be fast. You fix your sound, and then you will come back gloriously. And if you manage to fix your sound while I speak, I will happily move away. Okay. Should I do it, Susan?
Go ahead, Aya.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Aya Keefe. I'm Deputy Borough President to Manhattan Borough President Mark Levine, who is very sorry he couldn't be here today. We had to actually keep him away from dialing with 7 hours time difference at 4 a.m. in the morning, just so he can make it to your annual meeting. But I will do my best representing him here tonight. I want to start by thanking Susan for your service, and of course, Al Doyle, thank you so much for all your work so far. I hope your retirement will allow you to now go serve on other boards and enjoy them throughout the city. And also congratulations, John, for the new position. I also want to give a special shout out for all of the residents of Stuytown that are serving on Community Board 6. We have a very large representation of you on the board, and you are doing holy work, serving your community. And this is a sometimes thankless work. So thank you so much for that. We spoke a lot about the Rent Guidelines Board proposed rent hike, but it's never enough talking about this issue. Obviously, the Manhattan Borough President has been a strong advocate for years now, advocating for rent freezes. It's unbelievable that after what happened last year, we're still standing in the situation today with rent hikes as high as 2 to 5% for the 1 year and 4 to 7 for the 2 years. As Councilmember Powers mentioned, we did ask for a hearing together here in Manhattan, and I'm sorry to find out that it didn't happen. But by all means, all of you, do what Anne Greenberg said and register your concern and make sure that our voices are heard. This is a time where the housing crisis is raging, and the median rent last month was hit again a record high of $5,000. So we need to fight for a rent freeze. I also earlier this month, the end to the federal COVID emergency order happened. I think some people don't totally understand why that matters. I think the pieces that really are going to impact us is we're going to see the end of some of the programs that we've learned to rely on. For example, the free COVID tests that we were able to get everywhere, and also the supply of COVID tests in your community centers. So while they still have the supply now, once it's done, it's not going to be replenished. Thankfully, we have health and hospitals, so you can still get your vaccine for free, and you can still get Paxlovid if you are testing positive for COVID. But hi, Harvey. I'm almost done. I promise.
You can hear me though, Aya, right?
Yes, we
Wow.
can hear you.
And you sound really good. And just in general on COVID, I mean, I think all of you know that Mark during the pandemic has spent a lot of time advocating for resources for our city. Our office is always committed to helping you navigate any issues you have with COVID. So by all means, reach out to us. Finally, also last week, our office just released our recommendation on the special permit for Madison Square Garden. I think, as most of you know, the arena has been operating over the last 10 years under a special permit. This special permit is set to expire this summer. And so the Borough President's Office has a role in the ULOP application for the renewal of the special permit. Mark really took the opportunity to say that it's time for us to stop wondering whether MSG is going to move and really focus about our vision for Penn Station. It's been a subpart station for way too long. It is the busiest station in Northern America, and New York City deserves more than that. So in the special permit application, we've taken the opportunity to set a 5-year term limit on the permit and to say, MSG, you have to come to the table and work with the railroads, work with DOT, work with CB5, make sure we get the Penn Station we deserve. That means, to us, that means creating a new grand entrance on 8th Avenue, repurposing what is used to be called the Hula Theater, now just a theater. And then also creating a more efficient loading in the taxiway in the mid-block and adding new entrances there, and enhancing the public spaces around the arena. So stay tuned for that. This is still ongoing, but we really hope this would help bring about a new Penn Station that can serve all of us. I will stop talking. I'm going to be here if you guys have any more questions, but in general, the Borough President's Office is here to serve you in everything you need. Just reach out to us. You know how to find us. Harvey, all yours.
Thanks, Aya. It's good seeing you. And Susan, thanks for your leadership. You can hear me now, right? Great. And Al, I mean, I've known you for a really long time, and you've really done incredible work for the Stuytown Tenant Association, and really you are an unsung hero for saving thousands of units in Stuytown and across our city. And I know people really applaud you and appreciate all your work. Kristen did a lot about our budget. She talked a lot about what happened around the budget, so I don't think I need to add much there. Keith talked about the rent guidelines board and how critical that is. As people know, I served for 5 years on the rent guidelines board as a tenant representative, so it was a really important place to be. And we need to have a Manhattan hearing. We didn't have every borough hearing, and when I got on the board, we made sure that it happened. I think Keith will get it back, and we're also writing a letter on behalf of state legislators why we need a rent freeze and how critical it is today. So I think, as Kristen said, we did a lot in the budget, and things we didn't do were tenant issues. We didn't resolve so many tenant issues, from good cause eviction to doing additional rules and regulations around rent guidelines board, around, making sure we could legalize basement apartments and ADUs, and helping us figure out a way to convert commercial to residential. There's so much we needed to do on housing this year in the state budget we didn't do. We only have 7 days left, and I'm hopeful that we can do something on housing because we critically need it. We have a housing crisis, but unfortunately, it's going to be really tough. Yeah, other things that are really going to be tough, I think we're going to talk about street safety, and I know hopefully we'll be able to slow down our streets and make it more safer for pedestrians and for our community. Every week we hear from people in our district around how difficult it is on the streets, and with cars and e-bikes and safety, and we really need to manage that crisis, and we're going to. We did get another 1,000 beds in the state budget for people with long-term mental health issues, and people who live in our neighborhood and walk around, and we see people with serious mental health issues on our streets, and they need to be hospitalized and they need care. We need to be safer, and I think 1,000 new beds is an important start. It's not going to resolve the entire crisis, but it's an important first step. People notice that Mount Sinai, Beth Israel sites on 17th Street, they'll be selling 4 properties. Chris and I are really focusing on trying to make sure that whatever they sell to is really community driven, not more market rate housing and large development. We need affordability as part of any future plan. Congestion pricing is always an issue people talked about. Congressman Adler might talk about that, and talk about migrants. We are getting more migrants in our district. They just opened a new migrant center on 7th Street and Avenue B. 240 people are staying there. We're doing a clothing / essential drive, having people come to my offices starting this Thursday at 107 Avenue B. If they can drop things off, people have additional clothing. Literally, migrants are coming to our neighborhood, put the clothing on their back. They have nothing else. They have no access to Wi-Fi. They don't have a pair of shoes. Some people, they don't have food. So if people feel like they want to be able to do something for the migrants that are in our community, there's literally 240 of them right on 7th and B, right across the street from my office in this former St. Bridget's school site. So our goal in the next 7 days is to have you help us do more around housing. We really need to do something, not just on the bills to strengthen our rights under rent regulation, and not just on our bills to deal with Frankenstein and other things we see, but also making bills. I carry some and other members carry others to do that. But unfortunately, this has not been a good tenant year. We've had some real difficulties in the legislature on passing tenant legislation this year and doing housing. I'm not going to give up because that's not what we do. But the more our voices are lifted, the more we hear from everybody, the more we can do. Again, people reach out to my office. It's right at 107 Avenue B. People can come over. I'm happy to talk to folks. Kristen and I will be done in Albany as of the end of next week, so we'll be more available in the district. I have a shredding event. People love the shredding event, but we're doing it right across the street from Bellevue Hospital on July 15th. So if people want to do that. And if people have questions, they can reach out to me. I'll be doing also Hang with Harvey events over the summer. You'll be getting my newsletter in a couple of weeks. And if people want to talk about any issues that are happening in the district or around our state, I'm happy to be doing that with you all. I want to thank all the new elected representatives of the board and for our amazing leaders who are continuing. Thank you for all your work, and I look forward to our continued work together.
Thank you very much, Harvey. I don't know if you'll be available for our questions, but we're going to get to them very soon. In the meantime, one more thing from Aya before, I don't know if Jerry Nadler is going to be able to join us, but Aya, I was wondering whether you would be able to say something about gaming
She hopped off, but I'm
She
happy to,
hopped off.
I think she might have hopped off. Did you want me to take
Sure.
that? I think
Oh.
she's back.
Oh. I thought I saw her just now.
I'm here, but Keith, you can go ahead and I can jump in, whatever you prefer.
Sure. On casinos gaming, is that the
Yes.
top? Yeah. So right now, as many people know, there's a number of proposals out there. We have one that's not terribly far from us at the Solo site being proposed, maybe about roughly 10 sites being proposed for casinos here in New York City, or downstate, I should say. There are 3 licenses that are deemed to be, are going to do to be granted. I would say the conventional wisdom has 2 of them going to the existing racinos, one to the Aqueduct and one in Empire City up in Yonkers. So which would leave one downstate, whether it's in Nassau, Westchester, New York City, like with Long Island, New York City, or Westchester. We're very still early in the process. We are seeing the applications still going in and questions getting answered amongst that. There's a process where they can have to submit questions and go through the application process. Ultimately, each application is going to have to come to a community advisory committee that's made up of the elected officials that are for each site. So for the site that's at the Solo site that's not far from here, it's myself, the state senator, state assembly member, borough president, governor, and mayor. And that's going to be the same, different people, but same group for each one of these applications. They have to go through that process and have to get 4 of the 6 to approve them. If they get approved, they move on in the process and they keep going. And then there's going to be a land use approval process for the site that's still getting hashed out here that we choose to both legalize casinos in the zoning, but also to potentially do some other items that we'll have to do with each application. All this is ending up at the Gaming Commission ultimately for them then to pick 1, 2, or 3 of those sites, of new sites or the old sites to be picked. So there's a lot of time on the clock, I'd say right now. We are probably not hitting the community advisor process till later this year, maybe after Labor Day even. And a lot right now is a lot of the folks still gathering themselves, going through the early stages of the application process, getting questions answered. There's, I think, 2 rounds of questions for the applicants. Then they hit us, then there's zoning. So there's a lot of different approval processes. And as people may have seen, some of them had to get some different things in Albany that nothing that happened, but some that needed park alienation and other things that needed to get done. So, and I should say, when I say we're on the community advisor process, was actually an appointee of ours is on the community advisor process for each one of us. So a lot of time left. The newspapers are writing a lot of stories, it feels like, so they're covering it pretty well. You want to stay updated, but in the early stages, but still for sure keeping an eye on the ones that are my district. And there's I say roughly 10 between the city and as in Nassau right now.
Thank you, Keith. You know, the Solo site is very close to the UN. That would be really interesting if the UN representatives all fled during lunch hour to gamble.
Well, international money. There you go.
Yeah, right. Well, maybe we'll get some of the money back from the fact that they don't pay parking fees or whatever.
That's true. Good point.
So, okay, let's go to the questions. So, you know, congestion pricing was the absolute most popular topic. It got 6 questions, and I would like to read them so that those in the streaming audience hear them. So, one tenant writes in, we live south of 60th Street, in my case, for 50 years. I've always owned a car. Will I be financially punished every time I drive into the pricing zone? And then another one is, are there exemptions for tenants who pay for monthly parking in Stuytown garages? Why should I pay to travel from East River Drive to park in garage 6? If there's not an exemption, what can we do to lobby for it? Another tenant says it's nothing more than a tax penalty for choosing to live below 60th Street. How are you going to protect current residents that live below 60th Street? What is the TA and our politicians' position on congestion pricing? Will there be exemptions? What about Easy Pass residences? If not, it's a major tax on Stuytown residents. And finally, how is it fair that residents of poor and moderate income neighborhoods in Stuytown, East Village, Lower East Side will have to pay exorbitant congestion tolls when the wealthy Upper West, Upper East gets a pass? So these are all the sentiments that we have received. And, feel free, any of you, to just jump in and talk to these.
Sure. I'll take the topic, maybe more than an individual question. Look, the main thing I'd say right now is we don't know yet all the details. I'll tell you what we do know. And I think for many people, based on those questions, I think the best example that the best outcome would be maybe a scenario that looks like London, where the folks inside the zone, I think got like a 90% discount. They paid something, but a much more modest fee, recognizing the difference between the people that are living in the zone and those who are using the option of using the car to come into the zone. So I think if you take that example from London, that would be, if people are advocating or looking at this, perhaps the example to take a look at, and maybe the best case scenario for folks here. I have asked the governor's office and the congestion pricing panel in my testimony to them, where I did talk about the people that live in the district and talked about people that live in the periphery, and those very specific examples of, I'm just coming off a block off the FDR and, just want to duck my vehicle right into my garage. And I have them digesting those questions, but in the larger question here is the entire scheme and what's going to happen. It does look like congestion pricing is moving forward. Timing and details still to be determined. There is going to be, there's a panel basically that's been appointed to make these decisions. Those decisions might include what hours and what days that would be included in that, what type of exemptions might be included, at all, how to handle residents, how to handle the area surround. I represent all the way up to 98th Street. So for me, also how to handle certain scenarios like those people who live on the other side, but live, quite close and are going to feel crowded with a lot of vehicles potentially parking in their neighborhoods, all of that. So what I would tell folks, I see Congressmember Nader signing on now as well. I would say, folks, it is a good time to get a little activated and organized, and to ask for the questions you're asking and to advocate for the things you're advocating for, because those decisions are going to start being made in a real way. The biggest constraining factors, obviously, are revenue. They're very tied into, this is all very tied into the revenue they are trying to raise for the MTA, and congestion, to make sure that you actually do decongest the Midtown core. But the questions being asked are really good ones that the board's going to have to tackle. And I think folks like myself will be asking them to address as part of the plan. And but where I know, and as Dan noted, I think the TA did send on their website, I believe, did send a letter to the congestion pricing panel as well. And there'll be more of that, I'm sure, coming. So all good questions, not all details yet, but the two things to remember is decongestion matters, the revenue for the MTA matters. And so coming up with a plan that can do both of those things, while also trying to provide some relief for folks. Those are going to be the two main factors they're going to be looking at as they try to carve out or look at potential exemptions as they move forward.
Thank you, Keith. Congressman Nadler, thank you for joining us. I know that you are in the midst of an awfully important negotiation, and I appreciate your taking a break and joining us.
Yes, well, first of all, thank you to Susan Steinberg for inviting me, and thank you all very much for having me at your guest at the Stuyvesant Town and Peter Cooper Village Tenants Association annual meeting. I feel like I'm back home. I used to live in Stuyvesant Town. Of course, I don't remember it too well. I was not quite 4 when we moved away. It's a while ago. But it's a privilege to join the Stuyvesant Town and Peter Cooper Village residents tonight to now represent you in Congress. Speaking of Congress, I was late to join because of votes on the House floor. The House is back in Washington this week. We were supposed to be out this week, but we're back in DC for a couple of days to vote on the bill that would raise the debt ceiling for 2 years. It's incredibly unfortunate that Republicans took our country closer to default than we have ever been in our history. Congress has raised the debt ceiling cleanly 78 times since 1960, 49 under Republican presidents and 29 under Democratic presidents. This includes 3 times during the Trump administration. Unfortunately, House Republicans are holding our nation hostage on this issue because Joe Biden is president. I commend the president for reaching an agreement with Republicans that is far better than the draconian spending cut bill that they passed in the House. That bill would have decimated the VA, the Medicaid, and food security programs. However, I still have concerns about the new agreement as well. The deal freezes spending on domestic programs, imposes some new work requirements on federal food assistance programs, and changes some rules around energy permitting. One of the many reasons I am concerned about freezing domestic funding is that the federal government should be supporting New York City as much as possible while it works to house and care for asylum seekers. I was proud to work with Senator Schumer to create a new $800 million pot of FEMA grant money to assist the city with asylum seekers. This financial aid is not compromised in the debt ceiling agreement, but more will be needed. I'm also working to get the city additional funding for food security programs, for public housing, and more in this year's appropriations process. I have also urged the Biden administration to ease the undue delays in granting work authorizations to asylum seekers. Many asylum seekers want to work and give back to their new communities. I have asked the administration to help welcome asylum seekers nationwide by decreasing the regulatory 150-day waiting period for asylum seekers to be able to apply for work authorization. This would also greatly ease the financial burden on New York City. I was asked to touch on Medicare for All and congestion pricing. Let me start with Medicare for All. I was proud to once again be an original co-sponsor of the Medicare for All Act when it was reintroduced last month. I've supported the Medicare for All Act since it was first introduced in 2003 with 38 co-sponsors. My support for Medicare for All is based on one simple belief: healthcare is a human right, not a privilege. It is not acceptable to me that over 70 million people today in the United States are either uninsured or underinsured. Americans, regardless of income, are entitled to and deserve the best health care that our country can provide. It will be difficult to pass Medicare for All in this Congress with Republicans in control of the House, but I promise I will keep fighting for it until the bill is signed into law. Now, I'd like to conclude by touching on congestion pricing. In 2019, New York State authorized a congestion pricing program to reduce traffic gridlock and automobile emissions, fix and electrify our aging subway and bus systems, and make our streets safer. It's no secret that our streets across the 5 boroughs are clogged with traffic, resulting in buses and ambulances that travel at walking speed and in unacceptable levels of carbon emissions. The average bus and ambulance speed in New York City is barely above 9 miles per hour, the slowest in the country, due in large part to other vehicles blocking bus lanes. After years of delay by the Trump administration, I am very grateful that the Biden administration has finally approved the congestion pricing plan. Congestion pricing will be a vital tool for saving lives, improving transit, making our air more breathable, and setting our city up to tackle the challenges of the 21st century. So I thank you for listening, and unfortunately, I've got to go off to another vote now. So thank you all.
Vote the right way. And thank you very much for bringing us up to date on what's going on.
You're quite welcome.
Okay, bye-bye. All right.
Susan, can I just say one thing about congestion pricing? Just
Totally.
because, because, when we passed the original bill, I tried to get residential exemption. We didn't get that. We only got people who make $60,000 a year or below. Then Brad, when he represented Stuytown, and I put a bill changing it to 120% of AMI.
Mhm.
So if we could get residents in the community to rally around that bill that Brad and I introduced, that would be really helpful as well.
Well, we'd like to help with that. So if, we get information on it, we will do what we always do, go out to our constituency and ask them to support it. So does Kristen, did you have something you wanted to say about congestion pricing?
Yes, Susan, thank you. I realized I put it in the Zoom chat, but just for the folks that are streaming, I just wanted to echo that I feel that this tax puts an undue burden on our Manhattan residents in the district, and certainly echo what Councilmember Powers said. We'll be working with Assemblymember Epstein to support the bill that he and Senator Hoylman are carrying. But yeah, definitely committed to organizing against this, because it shouldn't be our working year, it shouldn't be our residents that are taking on the brunt unfairly. So absolutely, thank you for giving me the space to echo that.
You're welcome. So, okay, so some other questions. This new local law 97, which is eventually going to require the city to meet new energy standards, energy efficiency and greenhouse gas emissions, are going to lead eventually to the conversion of gas and electric service. And I know initially it's going to be for new construction, but eventually it's going to affect existing buildings and require a makeover, if you will. So the question is, will the owners be able to recoup through MCIs what they might not be able to obtain through available financial funding for this effort?
So I have to go back and answer that question. I have to go back and whoever asked that question to reach out to us directly so I can give you the clearest answer. I believe the answer is no, because when that law was originally drafted, one of the biggest concerns that many people had, I'm one of them, is that it was going to lead to rent increases based on all the improvements that were going to need to be done. And there was a lot of conversation about rent stabilized tenants as part of that conversation. There are I'd have to go back and get you a clearest answer. There was a lot of conversation to make sure that they did not impact the rents of rent stabilized tenants, because that was a big concern of a lot of us in the council and even the advocates working on the bill. So I want to say no, but I would have to give you a clear answer offline. I'm happy to follow up with Susan. You can distribute to the right person. Not the goal to have that happen, obviously. And while there's always things that a landlord could do that would qualify, I guess, a boiler or something like that, that might help with the total output that then could be passed on to the tenant. The intention is certainly not there, and we're not trying to. There's a lot of conversation around local law 97 and how it might impact. Now, I don't know where our complex is in terms of compliance either. Obviously, things like the solar panels on the roofs and other measures taken here are both good policy and help with that, but I'm not sure where we are in terms of full compliance. So something we have to take a look at.
Okay, I'll follow up with you.
Yeah, I'll get you an answer. Sorry about that.
Okay, well, it's 7:40. What I'd like to do is, there were actually a number of questions that were very local. In other words, things that I could possibly answer. So I'm going to whiz through them and then we'll adjourn the meeting. So we have a question about, can you comment? 14th Street is all, between First and A is always an issue. Frankly, I see that the vendors have a lot of people who like to buy from them. And, I don't know what you can do about that, because as long as there are people who are going to sustain them, they're going to be there. But I know that you've been very active, Keith, in trying to clean that up.
Yes, and you know what? I just remembered that I think the actual answer to this is that I don't think our buildings actually have to comply with local law 97, because I think that the answer is rent stabilized buildings had some level of exemption from local law 97 based on how many rent stabilized apartments are. But let me get back with a clear answer on that. Look, 14th Street is a never ending or nonstop thing that we're paying attention to. I just walked back down it right now. I text the sanitation department and I text the vendor, but they do vendor enforcement now as well, including trash, to get folks out there. There was vendor enforcement happening there. I went to Trader Joe's yesterday. There was vendor enforcement happening outside, but you are right. There is a market of folks who are using and utilizing it. So folks are continuing to sit up there. But, folks, it's a thing I hear all the time, and we're trying to make sure there is enforcement and cleanliness, and people have a right to walk down the street and feel like it's they're not getting harassed, or they have space to walk, and much more. So, Kirsten and I talk almost daily about what's going on in that block. She's been great from the tenant association about flagging issues for me. Those goes direct. People know it's this side of the street is mine, that side of the street isn't, but it's my neighborhood and I walk down it. And so for me, it's really important it's clean and safe. So it's a little bit of whack-a-mole. We're asking as warm weather gets, here again, and there's going to be a lot more activity out there to have steady enforcement. The good news here is a change agency. Sanitation is doing all enforcement around these issues now. So it's a kind of one-stop shopping when I need them to come out and take something down, or there's structure to be taken down, or cleanliness or whatever, it all can be done in one time. The PD is out there as well. But we need a steady presence. It's constantly, I'm paying as much attention as I can. And I met with the T-Mobile folks recently, and they've remarked, a lot of improvement than what used to be right in front of their store in the height of COVID. But it's a nonstop thing that we're doing, and it's a heavily used location these days with Target and Trader Joe's, and there's some new stores there as well. So it's a lot of activity, train stations. So we're doing everything we can, but people should feel free to reach out to us as there's an ongoing issue, so we can flag it for folks to get out there as well.
Okay, thank you. A question came in. What's going on with the combined heat and power plant structure? I have an update for you, which is Beam is in the process of removing the equipment. They're going to go ahead with the green roof, but they have not yet decided what the ultimate disposition of that structure is going to be, what use they're going to make of it. But they're not going to start it up again. Somebody was afraid that was going to happen, and it's not. When will Sty Cove Park reopen? Well, as a matter of fact, there's a ribbon cutting tomorrow at 10 p.m. Yes, I know, and everybody is welcome. It's the north part of the park. By all means, if you're interested, show up by 10 a.m. and hear what Keith has to say. And when will the construction by the East River be completed? Project Area 2 should be completed by the fall of 2024 when they finish Murphy Brothers Playground. Let's see, what's going on with the exterior work at 6, 8, and 10 Stuyvesant Oval, where there's scaffolding. It's a facade repair project, and many of the repairs have been completed, and they are on track to finish in September. So somebody asked if we could negotiate something with Blackstone instead of have the Rent Guidelines Board increase. Well, unfortunately, because we are a rent-regulated complex, we have to abide by the Rent Guidelines Board. There's no such thing as a little private negotiation with Blackstone. And finally, if you have any concerns or any questions regarding the resiliency project, you should get in touch. I know there's some safety issues on the 20th Street and Avenue C. Get in touch with the community liaison for the Eastside Coastal Resiliency. Her name is Nadine Harris, and her, you go to ESCRCCL2@ddccr.com. I repeat, ESCRCCL2@ddccr.com. And I thank you all for attending this meeting, and I thank our panelists for their presentation, and see you next year around this time. Good night, all.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Good night, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Hi, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.